Welcome back this week in pharmacy. I am your host, Todd Eury, founder of the Pharmacy Podcast Network. It's great to be back with you. Thanks for listening. Thanks for all of the feedback that you've been giving us on the topics, because you know what? I don't want to talk about things that you don't want to hear about. So if there's ever a topic that we're missing at This Week in Pharmacy, number one, you are invited to attend, be a part of the show, help us grow the show. Let's talk more about pharmacy technicians. My friend Mike Johnston is leading an organization that's been dedicated to pharmacy technician success for years. We're going to be resurfacing that relationship between the MPTA and the PPN. We're so excited about that, what's coming. There's a lot going on right now. If you haven't noticed, if you're following the Pharmacy Podcast Network on LinkedIn, you'll see that we have our 3-part series coming out from the NACDS. Part 2 is out, and it's just been great to work with so many people who are dedicating their entire lives to national chain, micro chain pharmacies. And we're excited to talk with Marcus Senza and Alif Tengor, who's the founder of B&U. Marcus Senza is the CEO of IPC, one of the largest buying groups dedicated to community pharmacy. Heather Harrow with DiversifyRx. Nicholas Turas. Dr. Turas is the lead business development guy over at Babson Diagnostics, where Babson is going to embed itself into community pharmacies to do blood testing. So your patients don't have to go to an obscure fast food type environment chain for drawing of blood, and how that data is going to really play into future services that will come out of the community pharmacy. And then I want you to pay attention to also Breck Rice is a special friend. He is part of the Pharmacy Podcast Network. He's with ServRx, and he has insights in part 2 as well. And I'm telling you what, the feedback that we get from the coverage of the conferences, I just want to say thank you to the listeners. People are sending us different things that we might have missed, subjects that we've missed, and it's much appreciated. Also, the data-driven path to biosimilars. I didn't understand biosimilars. It was very mysterious to me. We got a lot of education from Cardinal Health's biosimilars division back in the Assembia days, probably about 4 or 5 years ago. But since then, we've had a surge of interest in understanding how do biosimilars play into specialty rare disease. You got to listen to this episode from Purple Lab as Dr. Russell Robbins returns to the pods to really dissect and open up how data is so important, specifically to biosimilar success. Shout out to our holistic pharmacist who's really driving a lot of great content, Marina Boskov. She has an interesting conversation on a novel topical probiotics and how our skin is so important, and dives into that. And, even though this is TWIRx from last week, if you didn't get to listen to Ashley Walker, Dr. Ashley Walker, talk to us about her experience as a deaf pharmacist and how challenging life has been, and how she's overcome a lot of the issues that she's experienced as being not being able to hear, and how sign language is overlooked in community pharmacy. There's so much that we can unpack from that, and also how independent pharmacies have an opportunity with programs that she's designed to stand out in your community as a pharmacist who focuses on caring for people that are hard of hearing or deaf. So you got to listen to that episode. Hey, I'm excited today. I don't really get to have co-hosts pipe in because these shows are so quick. You're listening to this on Friday, September 6th already, and we're doing the show on September 6th. So this is hard to sometimes find people who are very busy, who are successful in the pharmacy market at large, and to come in. But I want to welcome my co-host for today, Saleem Shah with CPCG. Saleem, it's so good to have you here.
Excited, super excited, Todd. Thank you very much. Thanks for the opportunity.
You're very welcome. I'm going to open up. We're going to get into Saleem's background a little bit. But before we do that, Saleem, we want to jump right into our Twitter news, our TWIRx news, and lots of this is coming from. I still love Twitter, but it's the popularity of Twitter has died down over the years. I used to do that was like my favorite social media platform, but Endpoints, which is a tech magazine, I follow them, and that's where I get this information. So I'm pulling this from just came out today, or actually yesterday, and it said that there's a looming threat in telehealth and how important telehealth was during the COVID pandemic, and how the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Administration, is kind of pulling back on some of the growth of how telehealth has been used. What have you heard in your neck of the woods with regards to leveraging telehealth and even in the pharmacy space?
Well, so a couple of comments there. I mean, telehealth was, when it started, it is a breakthrough usage of bringing availability for the patient. So I'm going to say a few words in favor of telehealth. Yeah. I think the response of most of the government departments is usually like a pendulum. It swings on extreme directions. So telehealth was discouraged before, although it was working out fine. Then COVID came, and then no choice was left, and then telehealth blown out of proportion.
Yep.
Now we are reeling it back, but I have a feeling we're going to reel it a little too back, and then we'll be, basically depriving the service. Because, America, we have a lot of rural patients.
Yeah.
Chicago looks big, but it's a tiny dot, right? So the rest of the Illinois, there's a lot of rural land, just for example, right? So I'm slightly concerned that this reel back is going to go with an inertia, and we're going to choke the model again. And it was choked before also. That's what I'm going to say. Better policies are needed.
Yeah, I tell you what, I remember the .com gold rush. Makes me sound old, but I remember 99, 90, 2000, 2001, when the internet craze entered in and how e-commerce was being proven, and people were still doubting it. And a bunch of people went out and built websites and did things and went way ahead of the skis of what was realistic at the time. And then all of a sudden you had the bust. You had the collapse of the .com bust in 2000, 2002, 2003, 2004. And then now we know that the internet, of course, is the staple of commerce. It's a platform that we're all using. But back in the day, that just wasn't the case. It was we need to grow things. So I think telehealth falls in that same category. I do want to bring up something. We've been following Rite Aid in their Chapter 11, where they go into restructure, and they filed for bankruptcy under Chapter 11 in order to kind of do that. And no more pharmacies from Rite Aid in the entire state of Michigan, which is kind of scary. We know that pharmacy deserts are still going to get worse before they get better. But the good news is that the U.S. chain Rite Aid is finally emerging from bankruptcy. And the reason why that's good news, even though I side kind of with independent community pharmacy, it's going to open up these Rite Aids that went dormant for a while, where that's the only pharmacy for miles and miles away, just to lessen the impact of what the pharmacy deserts are going to have on us.
Rite Aid is just, it makes me crack. This guy never looks healthy, but doesn't die. What's up with that?
Yeah, that's a good point.
So I don't know what to say, on this one. But one business comment, at least in my ownership of pharmacies, I personally think that instead of running away or getting intimidated, I'm talking about independent pharmacies, from these chains, I say we should plug ourselves right in front of them, because their shedding is enough for us to retire. Yeah. I used to say this to my team. I said, if we pick up the shedding of these chains who are around us, that shedding is good enough. Just provide a better service.
Yep, absolutely. All right. So the next article I want to throw into TWIRx today is how pharmacy educators are using social media to engage and inspire students. This story comes from Pharmacy Times, and it goes into some of the testimony of Dr. Alexis Juarez, PharmD. She's a professor in pharmacy practice at the University of Louisiana. I'm really glad to see that pharmacy schools are bringing to attention the purpose in the realm of an HCP versus a layperson. If you're just the average bear and you're not into healthcare, your social media interaction is slightly different. And how a pharmacist, when they take the oath to keep the public safe, there's an element of, hey, you have some responsibility in the world of social media too. So where we want to inspire these young future pharmacy leaders, we also want to say, hey, be cognizant, be careful of your social media trail. And this is a very interesting article, Saleem. So I just wanted to bring this to your attention as well.
Yeah, no, this is I took the glimpse of, some of the writings in the article. Absolutely. I mean, it's, first of all, everyone should be careful using, a powerful tool like social media. But then when it comes to basically licensed professionals, who have an oath, their responsibility becomes, multifold in this case. And they definitely have to be, careful. And they are, they are growing with social media. There is no other way. My son saw a newspaper, which I used to subscribe and then read. No, seriously. And then I opened this up. I said, newspaper. And then he said, well, isn't it like a little cumbersome, like the size and all that? And I just rolled it, smacked him, in his head. I said, that's what it's used for also. There's another purpose of that thing. But it was a joke, But basically, he found it really weird, the size. And I started realizing, I said, you know what? The size is weird, actually.
Yeah.
No one paid attention. But yeah, absolutely. Social media, especially when someone is in a highly sensitive, clinical, and HIPAA-driven environment, who have a responsibility and people take their word seriously, they have to be double cautious.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So the last article that I'd like to share, because I'm proud of this organization, is AscellaHealth is recognized as SHSMD Calendar of Healthcare Observance for Gene Therapy and Specialty Pharmacy Awareness Month. And I covered an entire subject all about gene therapy and the specialty pharmacy market at the Assembia conference just this year. We're going to be returning to the NASP, the National Association of Specialty Pharmacy. I am going to be reaching out to AscellaHealth again. We've had them on the show several times, and one of the times was with Mike Baldzicki. Now, he's not with AscellaHealth anymore, but he is board of directors at the NASP, and how gene cell therapy is going to open up an opportunity for pharmacists that are in that specific sector of care, and how we need more pharmacists to really understand this. But I'm excited about this. Want to shout out to AscellaHealth and say congratulations. And once again, it's just another opportunity for pharmacists to rise up as healthcare providers and treatment specialists. And I need to know more about it. So a shout out to organizations that are tied in. Hey, we had some podcasts this month that I want to point out and just want to shout out to Pitt University of Pittsburgh School of Pharmacy, Joni Carroll. She's done some amazing work with the School of Pharmacy there. If you're listening and you're part of the School of Pharmacy, reach out to us. We want to get your pharmacy students involved for sure. Saleem, I want to shift the gears now. We're kind of done with our news segment, and I want you to give our listeners a little preview of some of the projects that you and I are going to be working on. And I'm going to start with a story before I turn it over to Saleem. So I'm a struggling entrepreneur. I think all entrepreneurs can say that. And in order to grow this business, we need clients that see the value, and we need to boost their messaging, tie their messaging into better clinical outcomes, better pharmacy care services. But then we need to be able to have catering to pharmacists and what they need. So part of that strain on me as an entrepreneur is I used to be a one-man band. Now I have a small team, is the ability to scale. And I am not the only entrepreneur that's dealing with scalability. You are also an entrepreneur, Saleem, but you've come up with an extremely interesting model that the Pharmacy Podcast Network is now going to partner with you and CPCG in order to take advantage of that scalability opportunities that you're presenting. Give our listeners a little insight into this. You talked with Bruce Nealon originally a little bit about this, but let's talk to the listeners again about what you do.
Well, throughout my ownership, which was many healthcare businesses, obviously the topic for decades, and it will always be the topic, is basically the most expensive part of a business, which is human capital.
Yeah.
That is the most expensive part. I still remember when we were opening up new locations, because we were slightly, more than just the pharmacy ownership. So brick and mortars were coming, and my team and executives, they'd be like, Saleem, $30 on a square foot, $20 on a square foot, blah, blah, blah. Do we invest that? And I used to remind them, I said, sometimes this is equal to one position. You make one wrong hire, and it's equal to your brick and mortar. It's a fact, right? Yeah. A 1,000 square foot location on $30 is a $30,000 a year. 2,000 square foot location is a $60,000 a year. 60,000 mistake happens all day long. And even it's not a mistake, it becomes a no choice that you have to swallow that pill. That happened. And then about 5 years ago, then I just said, you know what, I'm going to look at this situation. In fact, I was looking at my P&L one time. That's like even more than 5 years ago. This is how the story kind of went. And I was looking at it. And our compounding pharmacies, I used to put the labor in the cost of goods. Some pharmacies do that. R&D credits and some taxation help and things of that nature. It's not uncommon. A factory may put their people as a cost of goods. Because when your employee is become part of the manufacturing, some companies put them as a cost of goods. And I looked at it, cost of goods. I did it for many different locations, and then I moved on. But then I turned around and came back. I said, wait a minute, this is really a cost of goods. It is a cost of goods. So I'm like telling another Saleem, repeating this, that it is a cost of goods. I'm haggling with $2, $5, this chemical, I'm going to, pay you a quarter less on a gram. What about this cost of goods? And then this whole concept started, and then back then it went away. It was a stayed in my brain, in my back memory. And then 5 years ago, reaching more than 5 now, we decided that we are going to launch a highly trained segment of human capital, which is going to be a affordable and economical cost of goods. Mm-hmm. Now, in order for us to do that, we had to go outside of the, boundary. Mm-hmm. So we went across the globe. The challenge was that this is happening across the globe for a very long time, but not on a specialized function.
Yep.
We were at advantage that we had ran all of these businesses with our control and ownership, and at that time still owned those businesses. So we basically launched CPCG, which is Collaborative Patient Care Group, and we said we are going to bring 2 things to the table. One is a human capital, and the other one is technology. That's all you need. That's the recipe. You need technology, which is emerging, and at the same time, you will always need human, because we are human.
Yep.
So I'm never going to go against them. So we require the human capital. That's how the story started. From a few employees, now there are several hundred employees. That's it.
I'm excited about it, because I'll tell you what, I'm thinking of our community pharmacies that want to expand. They want to grow programs. They want to get marketing messaging out there. Sometimes they want turnkey product that they don't have to do much but, represent it to their communities. I want to dig into long-term care pharmacies who need extra help with physician detailing and physician outreach, who have specialties in dementia or incontinence or something that's impacting our seniors. I cannot wait to dig in with you to the consultant side of our pharmacists. Shout out to our consultant entrepreneurial pharmacists who are listening right now, and you're saying to yourself, I want to launch my business, I'm ready to go, but I don't have any infrastructure. I don't have anybody to take care of my books, my marketing, my brand, my logo, creation of stuff, follow-up, appointment setting, assistance, just things that would make you a full-fledged operation company so that you can grow as a consultant. So Saleem, you are going to return to This Week in Pharmacy several times over again so that we can really dig down into specific micro subjects of where we're going to leverage this outsourced intelligence and this outsourced human capital, which I think is wonderful. So I'm excited about this.
Yeah, it is. It is very exciting. The first is the establishment of the value, which I think I tried, where I said, okay, guys, it is a cost of goods, right? Like I mentioned. Now people say, okay, it's a cost of goods, Saleem, how are you going to reduce that? And how about the function? That's where the fragmentation comes in.
Yep.
No one is replacing a full position. The whole concept of this kind of methodology, which I built, is that I'm going to evolve my people. How do I evolve them? I need to take the minutia out of their daily work and only leave them with their specialized function. Because my tech went to school to become a pharmacy tech. She did not go to school to learn how to pick up a fax from the fax machine. Mm-hmm. Let's get the fax machine out of the equation, because we all have technology. And how about a back-end human capital which can take care of all of these faxes? So my tech is especially counseling the patient along with the help of pharmacists, selling OTC. This is a tiny example, but we formulate that with mathematics actually. And that's called fragmentation.
All right. Well, we are out of time because our next segment's coming up. Our next segment is going to be with Dr. Tenille Davis, PharmD. She is with the Alliance for Compounding Pharmacy, the APC. They are going to do a Compounders on Capitol Hill coming up in September. So if you are a compounder and you want to know more about the business, reach out to Tenille Davis, but stay tuned for her episode, which is coming up. And right after this commercial break, Saleem, shout out to you, Guy. Thanks for being on This Week in Pharmacy and co-hosting with me today.
Thank you very much, Todd. Thanks for having me.
We'll be back.
All right. Bye.
This episode is sponsored by Independent Pharmacy Cooperative, widely known as IPC. Established in 1983, IPC is the nation's largest group purchasing organization owned by independent pharmacy. With a mission of maximizing the success of community pharmacists, IPC works to provide members with access to effective programs and services designed to enhance profitability for independent pharmacy. Read more about our mission by checking out our website at ipcrx.com. That's ipcrx.com.
Hey, and on This Week in Pharmacy, I'm excited to get back together with the Alliance for Pharmacy Compounding. We have always thought, how does pharmacy continue to evolve? How do we give more services through community pharmacy? What about the geriatric setting? There's so many things inside just the long-term care setting. Specialty, I think of, organizations like the NASP, who's really helping us to build advocacy. So when you think of all of these associations, NCPA, the ASCP focusing on senior care, the NASP and specialty, the Alliance for Pharmacy Compounding, known as APC, is the one that pays extremely close attention to what's happening in compounding pharmacy. And I would like to introduce and welcome Dr. Tenille Davis to the show today. It's great having you on This Week in Pharmacy.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So the association that really helps to oversee what's happening from a legislative perspective, a business perspective, best practices in the entire world of compounding. And that has become compounded over the years with much of the FDA trying to like make things, and of course the drug manufacturers are behind it, where like, hey, let's just come out with a pill. It's going to fit everybody. Let's get this through and let's do less compounding. Me, as someone who's educated and understands the bigger picture, I want more compounding, not less compounding, because I want you to dial into what's specific to my body. And what happens when we run a PGX test and we find out that the XYZ NDC number that's being given to me isn't going to work for me, but a compounding medication that a pharmacist could really dial in to what's going on with my body. But I'm preaching to the choir. Give our listeners an overview of you, your background, and your role as Chief Advocacy Officer at APC.
Sure. So my name's Tenille Davis. I'm fairly new at APC. I took this position in February of 2024 as the Chief Advocacy Officer. Previous to that, I was the pharmacist in charge at a sterile and non-sterile compounding pharmacy in Scottsdale, Arizona for 16 years that was licensed in multiple states. So lots of background in the regulatory side, as I've gone through a lot of different inspections and had to clean up some things along the way. As the compounding rules changed over the years, we had to improve our practices. So that's always a good thing for pharmacy to get better, and that's something that I got to learn along the way. I graduated from Idaho State University College of Pharmacy in 2005. And before that, I worked as a pharmacy intern and technician. So it's really the only thing I've done my whole life. Advocacy wasn't ever anything I ever thought I was going to do, but in my role as the PIC at this pharmacy, I found myself drawn to the advocacy world because so many things affected my patients and my coworkers and my employees. And I found that actually I could make a difference. When USP first published its updated chapters in 2019, 795 and 797, I gathered a group of Arizona pharmacists together and formed a coalition. We hired an attorney, and we were one of the groups that filed an appeal with USP that against some of the provisions in those new chapters. I flew to Maryland and testified in front of USP. Our appeal was granted. There were 3 different groups that filed appeals, and our little Arizona group of pharmacists was one of them, which, that whatever happened with USP in the end wasn't perfect by any means, but I do like to think that the appeals that we filed did make a difference and helped with some of the beyond use states of compounded sterile products specifically, which is kind of where most of our comments were situated around. That's a little bit of background of how I got into advocacy. My role now is federal advocacy. We also do a lot of state level advocacy. There's 50 different state boards of pharmacy, 50 different sets of laws and rules. Boards of pharmacy, have lots of different opinions about compounding, and, there are some bad players sometimes that are out there. So we're constantly monitoring everyone, trying to make sure that all of our members are most up to date on the current set of laws and rules in all the states, and then, fighting for the protection of patient access compounded drugs at a federal level. We always say there's 2 instances that compounded drugs are appropriate for a patient. One is when an FDA approved drug is not appropriate for a patient. So patient has an allergy to an excipient in a tablet or needs a specialized strength or combination or route of administration that isn't FDA approved, or an FDA approved medication isn't accessible to a patient because of shortages typically. So if a drug appears on the FDA's drug shortage list, then it would be appropriate for a compounding pharmacy to make what's called essentially a copy of that FDA approved product. And as you might imagine, in the last 6 months, my job has been pretty busy with the media because compounded drugs are in the spotlight like never before. With the advent of GLP-1s and the life-changing nature of those medications, the inability of the drug makers to keep those drugs in stock, there's been a big focus on compounding in the media because of the ability of compounding pharmacists to step in and fill those gaps in the supply chain. Sorry, that was a very long-winded answer, but hopefully I got all of your questions answered in that intro part.
We like that. A shout out to Scott Bruner and his leadership. We just had him on This Week in Pharmacy not too long ago. And I wanted to also shout out to the listeners. The APC Compounders on Capitol Hill is coming.
Right.
It's on September 17th and 18th at the Hilton National Mall. Give our listeners just a little overview of the importance of this gathering.
Yeah, sure. So this is our annual fly-in event. Compounding pharmacists and their supporters from all over the country fly to Washington, D.C. And we've got a day of programming. Typically, we've got this year our first ever legal symposium that's occurring in conjunction with this conference. So we've got 4 hours of legal sessions about issues affecting compounding pharmacy. And then all of these compounders go to the Hill and they meet with their members of Congress, educate them about issues related to compounding, and then sometimes specific asks come up. So every year it's a little bit different as to what we're going to talk about. But this year, drug shortages are high on our list as that they're very prevalent shortages, and then also kind of at the top of everyone's mind with how much media coverage that they have gathered. So yeah, we'd love to have any compounding supporters there. There's still time to come. If you do come, make sure it's let us know quickly so we can get those visits scheduled with your members of Congress. But it's a really fun event, and the first time you go, it kind of really like lights that spark for advocacy, because there's a lot of excitement when a bunch of compounders get together and figure out ways that they can, protect their patient access, to compounded medications when those are necessary.
All right. So I think of the pure compounders, the pharmacies that are probably much more intense, probably work in conjunction sometimes with hospital systems or something as the primary compounder. Then I think of the mixed bags where we have, maybe it's not super sterile compounding. Maybe it's something easy that can be embedded into a community pharmacy. All right, now I want to shift to those community pharmacies out there who are building new programs. There's programs that are coming out of home care. There's remote patient monitoring. There's treatment programs, sometimes weight management that kind of ties into, hey, you just took a branded medication like Ozempic or Wegovy or something. You're finished with it. Now let's get you on the real world so that you don't balloon back your weight, or maybe something else happens. Let's put you on an entire program to manage these medications that you're on, along with maybe a nutritional guidance or plan that we can tie in a nutritionist. That's like actually happening. So one of the things that I'm talking a lot about is pharmacies that are prepared to move into compounding as another line of revenue. Talk to us and our listeners about what would it take to take the steps to get in? And do you go non-sterile first and then you go sterile, or what do you see over the years of your experience and how we help to grow compounding?
Yeah, so I mean, you're right that with the squeeze from insurance reimbursements, a lot of small businesses are moving into compounding as another stream of revenue. Compounded drugs typically aren't covered through insurance contracts, and so it's a nice cash-based source of revenue for those pharmacies. Compounding is not something that people jump into or should jump into just head first. It's definitely a big learning curve. Non-sterile compounding would definitely be a first line. The facility requirements alone are really complicated. So a little mom and pop corner drugstore can't just start compounding because of the requirements in the USP Chapter 795 and 800 related to compounding. They've got to have special facility requirements. So the first thing to do would be to hire a consultant to look at a build out, because especially if you're going to offer hormones are technically hazardous drugs. You need a negative pressure, non-sterile compounding room with hoods that are either vented to the outside or double HEPA vented to protect your employees from exposure to those hazardous drugs. So it's not something that people can just, on the turn on and decide to offer compounding tomorrow. I mean, simple compounds like a miracle mouthwash where you might mix together some Benadryl and Maalox and lidocaine is one thing, but any sort of compounding that required weighing and mixing of pure ingredients would require a specialized facility first. So hiring a consultant would be a really good place to start, because you've got to think about that build out and do a cost analysis on how much that's going to cost, because those are not inexpensive, and then how long it would take to return that investment. Some companies offer modular spaces for compounding. Some of those are good options. They tend to be a little bit more expensive in the short term, but in the long term, usually the turnaround time to get them installed is faster. So there's a lot of different options for those facilities. And then after facilities, or concurrent with facilities, education would be important. There's certain vendors in the compounding pharmacy space that offer classes that pharmacists can go to either online or in person to start learning the basics. Compounding is kind of the art and science of pharmacy. So it requires some hands-on skill, not just book knowledge. So making creams and capsules and things like that requires a little bit of practice. So going to those trainings in person or hiring an expert to come and do some training in your site is always a good idea. So you've got some of that practice, because it's not just mixing pure ingredient into a cream base to make a final product. You have to, perform geometric dilution appropriately so that the medication is evenly distributed throughout the cream base, so the patient gets the right amount of drug for every application. So there's those hands-on trainings that are always a good thing to attend, especially at the beginning.
Excellent. So also, I want to tell our listeners, A4PC.org. That's A4PC.org. And there is a really useful tab, and it's /federal. And the reason is because there's a list of things that the APC is really focused on. I want you to point out a couple of them that kind of lead us to compounders on Capitol Hill and what you'll be kind of most intense around.
Yeah. So there's a couple issues that we're discussing for CCH, or compounders on Capitol Hill. One of those is the demonstrably difficult to compound list. It's kind of a little bit of a silly word, but FDA is required to put drugs that it considers to be demonstrably difficult to compound on a certain list for 503A compounding pharmacies and 503B outsourcing facilities. The FDA has published in the Federal Register and proposed the first 3 types of compounds to go on that demonstrably difficult to compound list, and the 6 categories that it uses to evaluate if something is demonstrably difficult to compound. In federal statute, the FDA is only allowed to put drugs and not categories of drugs on the demonstrably difficult to compound list. So this is a very complicated, nuanced issue. But one of the things that we're going to be talking about is those comments that we've made to FDA about their process. Because if they continue forward with trying to put categories, it doesn't line up with what's in the statute and will cause problems and legal dispute likely down the road. Shortage drug compounding is another thing we're really focused on. Shortages are a huge problem in hospitals, in community pharmacies, and 503As and 503Bs are able to step in and fill that gap because of our ability to make essential copies during periods of shortage. Right now, the FDA only looks at data provided by drug manufacturers to determine if there's a shortage. They use a calculation, the supply-demand calculation, based on data that they get from manufacturers. But we know that when we work in a real pharmacy land, that even if a drug is listed as available on the drug shortage list, on the FDA's drug shortage list, you can't order it from Cardinal or McKesson. You can't get it in the real world. So we're asking for FDA to update its drug shortage list and take input from consumers, prescribers, pharmacists as well as think about maybe regional shortages, because sometimes something that is available in the Northeast isn't available, on the West Coast or vice versa.
Yep.
So that pharmacy compounders can help step in and kind of fill those gaps and continuity of patient care during those periods where drug supply chain is a little bit more spotty. So shortages is one thing that we're really focused on. And then correcting some of the media messaging that's out there surrounding GLP-1s and compounding. We know that there's counterfeit drug sellers. We know that there's illegal online drug sellers. Patients can, enter their credit card and get shipped a vial of what is purported to be semaglutide or tirzepatide. And even though those get lumped in with compounding, those are illegal activities and they're not compounding. So a lot of correcting those conflations of compounding with counterfeit and compounding with illegal online drug sales. We created a tool on our website. It's a4pc.org/isitlegit, because if a provider that you're working with is sending a prescription to a pharmacy and you want to check to make sure that pharmacy is a real, legitimate state licensed pharmacy, this is all the Board of Pharmacy websites. And on their website takes you directly to the page where you can search to make sure that pharmacy is licensed in your state. If you can't find the pharmacy, it's not a good sign, but you can always reach out to the pharmacy, because some states make them register under doing business as or DBAs. But for the most part, you should be able to find your pharmacy in that state licensed pharmacy listing. So we're trying to help people differentiate between, reputable, legitimate compounding pharmacies that are following rules set by state boards of pharmacy and, guidelines set by USP, rules set by FDA, and this illegal online drug sellers and purported sellers of counterfeit GLP-1s.
Excellent. Well, a shout out to your team. Excited about the upcoming event. We'd love to hear from you and maybe do a recap or something of how Compounders on Capitol Hill went. Also, a call out to all of our state pharmacy organizations to use the Alliance for Pharmacy Compounding as their beacon to pull information into each of the states. Because like you said, there might be something that's very specific to Idaho or Pennsylvania or something that is different from somewhere else. And that's important to be dialed into that. My last thing I have to say, because this came from Senator Shane Reeves in the great state of Tennessee, who was a pharmacy owner and now he's a senator. Do you see politics in your future because of you being an advocacy and being able to really understand, or do you think you're going to stay more in the association?
I don't know. I actually have been asked that by some people. So maybe it's something to think about, but I would probably think about something from a state level. And it's a lot harder to think about how I would make that apply in like a state level versus a federal level. I do serve on the Arizona State Board of Pharmacy, so I guess that's sort of a political position. But I guess we'll see what happens in the future. But as of right now, I'm happy, doing the advocacy work on behalf of the entire industry.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Tenille, we're proud of you as a pharmacist looking out for other compounding pharmacies and the importance of compounding staying relevant. Also getting more of it out there and having pharmacy owners understand that there is an opportunity if they take the necessary steps. Once again, A4PC, A4PC.org is the website, Alliance for Pharmacy Compounding. Tenille, promise me you'll come back to This Week in Pharmacy.
I would love to. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.